Hello guys, and welcome back to all 1,200 members of this channel. As you guys have probably seen the Australian Grand Prix, it was a pretty good race and there are a lot of talking points from that race that I'd want to cover, maybe not in this video but in other videos. But today we're going to be talking about why Mercedes are not going to come back. They're not going to be the force that they once was. Maybe in 22 we had the hope that Mercedes will get their act together. Maybe in 23 we thought, okay, they've started to build on what they had. You know, Lewis came P3 in the championship, they got P2 in the constructors, but now I'm pretty sure all hope is lost. After the Australian Grand Prix, I am fairly certain that they are the fourth fastest team, barely ahead of Aston Martin, and that's because of George's performances only. But speaking of Lewis, if you look at his qualifying results, they really haven't been good. Getting out-qualified by George 3 races in a row. In Saudi Arabia, he was nearly knocked out of Q3 by Ollie Behrman on his debut, and now he actually did get knocked out of Q3. So he starts 11th and he starts on the softs, can't make much inroads and can't really get too many overtakes done. And then obviously the engine collapsed. This is starting to get a little bit embarrassing for Mercedes. Whilst Toto Wolff makes every single excuse under the book, and after every press conference he says, you know, we're going to have to keep looking, we're going to learn about the car, we're going to be better, and it just never happens. Mercedes has promised a car capable of winning races 3 years in a row, and they haven't delivered. Not only have they not delivered, they're not like Ferrari. When Ferrari promises a better car, at the very least you can see they're getting better. They are actually closing the gap to the front. But Mercedes are literally going backwards. This time last year, Mercedes were running 1 and 2 at the start of the race, and Lewis got P2 and George would have got P3 had his car not blew up as well. But right now, if you told me that Mercedes were going to be running 2 and 3 comfortably, I would be laughing. Mercedes don't have that kind of pace in the car, and they don't even know where they're lacking. In Jeddah, their straight line speed is really good, so much so that Piastri can't get past Hamilton. But in Australia, they're so slow on the straights, Hamilton's losing 8 tenths. It literally makes no sense. The car is very erratic and the rear end seems to be extremely loose. And it makes you wonder what went wrong. Truthfully speaking, last year, Lewis made that car look good. At points in the year, because of Checo not performing very well and Lewis outperforming his car, it made it seem like he could actually challenge for P2 in the Drivers' Championship. And he ended up getting P3 in the Drivers' Championship. And that made it seem like Mercedes took a massive step forward, especially because they did beat Ferrari in the Constructors at the end of the season. And so when Mercedes rolled out their new concept with side pods saying they're going to have a better foundation, and they did say the car feels a lot better, it feels a lot more stable in testing and in Bahrain, and they said, oh, it's just a couple of little bit of kinks because of the engine and the cooling. Everyone thought, you know what, Mercedes could have a decent car this season, but it seemed time and time again it's just one thing after the other. It was cooling in Bahrain. In Jeddah, it was just high-speed corners, but they had great straight-line speed, mid-speed and low-speed corners. Now in Australia, they're losing so much in the last sector because their low-speed corners are now bad and the straight-line speed is terrible. Honestly, the downfall of Mercedes needs to be studied, because how can a team that dominated for 8 years straight fall so far from grace and have no hope of getting back to where they came from? I think part of the issue is what made Mercedes great in the past can't really be applied today for 2 reasons. One of them is because a lot of people are leaving Mercedes. I know Mercedes just acquired 2 people from Ferrari, but in bulk, if you had to look at the net people that left versus came in, Mercedes have lost a lot of key personnel. And it seems like a lot of people are leaving that team. And it seems like Mercedes is no longer the place you want to be if you want to become a champion. Everyone's putting their bets on Ferrari, Red Bull, or even Aston Martin, rather than going to Mercedes. And maybe it's because of the culture, maybe there's something we don't know about the way Mercedes work that just doesn't entice people like it used to. But it is clear that Mercedes operationally haven't been doing very well. And speaking of people leaving, who more important than Lewis Hamilton himself? Before the season started, Lewis Hamilton said that he was going to go to Ferrari, and obviously it was announced and yada yada yada. But the point is, he did that before having even seen the car. Now, I commented on this in the video that I made saying Lewis hasn't even driven the car, and yet he is so confident it's not going to slap in 2024 or 5 that he's willing to leave. Now, having looked at this a bit further and Toto Wolff having done a lot more interviews, I think it's a bit more clear why he left. It wasn't just because of the car. George obviously will get given a very long multi-year deal. However, they didn't want to give Lewis a solid multi-year deal into 2026 because they wanted to free up a space for Kimi Antonelli had everything go to plan. Now, obviously, Lewis didn't like this, the lack of trust. Mix that in with the fact that the team hadn't been listening to him on the concept of the car. And Lewis, when given an opportunity, left. And I think maybe that is part of the reason why they are losing so many people, because their loyalties have been changing and they haven't shown the trust in the people that got them to where they have been in the first place. And not only is Lewis going, he's trying to get Bono to come with him and a few other race engineers, which Mercedes are fighting very hard to stop. Now, having seen the car and how it's performing, I'm sure 100% Lewis doesn't regret his decision to leave Mercedes. Honestly, it's kind of difficult to think that once upon a time, we went into race weekend saying that Mercedes had already won the weekend or 1-2 and it was already over before it started. Now it seems like they're guaranteed P5 and P7 or P6 and P9. And if they're really lucky on an incident, they might get the odd second, third or second, fourth. But those are really it. They're fragments. They're not sustained for a whole season. And the days of Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes in that partnership mounting a full championship run over a whole season, I do believe are long dead. Because not only is the car slow, they don't actually know why it's slow. They don't know the fundamental reasons, which is why they're always saying we're doing experiments with setups on Lewis's car, which is why they're always saying different things are the problem every single race weekend. It makes you really wonder how they manage to get to the design that they have if they truly don't understand it. And also how other teams have managed to get a grasp on this. Guys, we're 3 years into the regulations, and from what I've been hearing, there's not going to be much change in terms of performance to 2025. Maybe a couple of teams are going to get slightly better, but it's largely going to carry on because most teams are going to focus on 2026. So what has Mercedes been doing the past 3 years to not understand the ground effect concept of the car? I get the fact that they've had no pods or zero pods for the past 2 years, and this is their first season with side pods. But it seems like there's still suspension issues. It seems like there's still issues in terms of the bouncing. It seems that the car is very reactive and unpredictable. And that really is something that should be left in the past. Now, obviously, speaking on this, George has actually been doing a pretty good job. He's outqualified Lewis 4 times so far, 3 times if you're including this year and 1 more time on the last race in Abu Dhabi, and has really looked like he's had the edge on Lewis. Now, obviously, they've said they're running experiments on Lewis's setups and they're putting sensors on his car, but I've got to ask, why are they just doing this to Lewis's car, even though Lewis is leaving at the end of the year? It doesn't make any sense. Surely they would want to run these on George's car because George is technically the main driver now. But in fairness to George, he has been fighting really hard, trying to squeeze out good results. Obviously, he DNF'd in Australia, but is that his fault? I mean, Alonso did get a 20-second penalty. A penalty I think is a slight bit too harsh, purely because 20 seconds, and it's kind of unclear whether he did brake test him. Obviously, it's very clear that he did something very different in that corner. He braked quite a bit earlier, but brake test, I don't think that is the words that Alonso did to Russell. And we've seen in the past when there has been brake tests like Verstappen and Hamilton in 2021, those are 10-second, maybe 15-second penalties. Honestly, I think it would have been better to give him a 10-second penalty, maybe a 15-second penalty, but I think 20 seconds is a lot. I think because of the nature of the crash, the FIA must have punished him a bit more, but I could be wrong. But even without that, Russell, he looked like he was going to get close, but I'm not sure even he would have overtaken Alonso even with the tyre advantage. Mercedes just looks like a wounded animal. They look very unthreatening. It went from Mercedes versus Red Bull, then it went to Mercedes versus Ferrari, and now it's looking like Mercedes versus Aston Martin, slowly and slowly moving down the grid. Obviously, I don't think they're ever going to become a backmarker team or a midfield team. The infrastructure at Mercedes is a bit too robust for something like that to happen. But with all these personnel leaving, Lewis leaving, the car being very unpredictable and unstable, and operationally Mercedes being a bit of a mess with strategies and pit stops, it does seem like the glory days of Mercedes are truly over. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not opposed to being wrong. I would happily be wrong in this instance because I am in fact a Mercedes fan. I want them to do well, but they've shown no sign of real improvement over the past 3 years. They've just shown glimpses, like in Hungary in 2022, in Brazil in 2022, in Hungary in 2023, in the Dutch Grand Prix in 2022. They've shown glimpses where one race that suits them very well, they can extract the most out of the car, but they haven't shown consistently to become the second best car on the grid and closing that gap to Red Bull. It's always, this weekend we might be able to do something, but over a season I can't guarantee it, which, as we know, Formula One is mostly about consistency. Consistency is what gets you to the top step. You don't win a championship by winning one race, but you can win a championship by coming P2 all season. Anyways guys, let me know your thoughts and comments down below and what you would like to see in the future.